Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
It's March Mania at Sports Interaction. NHL, NBA, March Madness, MLB, and so much more. It's bananas. You can play Pinata Picks and Minute Madness, exclusive games with insane odds that you can't play anywhere else. Make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Download the app in Ontario, use the QR code at the bottom of the screen, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. It's March Mania.
Whoops, I always play that twice.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Game Over Vancouver. I am your host, Canuck Clay Emo, on a night where the Vancouver Canucks lost. They lost to the visiting Los Angeles Kings, a team that they can usually beat quite handily, but it wasn't tonight. The Canucks lose 4-1 to the visitors. And not only that, we saw the debut of Akito Hirose. I love those half Japanese guys that come in the league. And we also saw the end of Elias Pettersson's 14-game point streak. So I'm not here all alone, but before I introduce my guests, I want to invite you to like this stream, to subscribe to the SDPN channel. We cover all 7 Canadian teams with these Game Over shows. And in fact, I think tonight we're also making history that we started last night. Right after this, the timing is going to be so good, you can go over to another SDPN show. We're doing our second SDPN Game Over WrestleMania. It's okay if you're not a wrestling fan. I am. I'm not afraid to admit that, but I'll pump that up at the end. So it's gonna be perfect. We're gonna go for 40 minutes here, and then that show is gonna start at about 8:30. But before we get to all that, I want to introduce you to my guest. I'm so thrilled to have him on. I tried to get him on a couple weeks ago. It didn't work, but it works tonight. So please welcome my friend Stephan Roget of Canucks Army. Stefan, welcome.
Hey, Clay, thanks for having me, and sorry for playing hard to get for a little bit there. You know, it's just a little bit of a power move on my part.
It's all right. If I didn't like you so much, I get upset, but how can I? Before we get started, can you tell everyone just quickly a bit about yourself and where you write, where you do your work, and where they can find you on social?
Hey, yeah, thanks. So I write from way up here in the north, on Clay de Laitonne land, otherwise known as Prince George, but you can find everything I do over on Canucks Army, which kind of has exclusive rights to me these days. So, Quadrelli runs a tight ship, and I'm happy to be one of the oarsmen on it.
Awesome. If someone wants to follow you on Twitter and your good work, what's your is it your full name, right?
It is just Stephan Roget. Yeah, it's one of the nice things about having a made up name is you can get it on Twitter without the underscore, numbers, or anything. So just first name, last name.
Awesome. So that's StephanRoget, Stephan Roget on Twitter.
That's
yes,
right.
and I'm not just BSing you. I said this to you when we did our little tech test in the second intermission. Obviously, I need to do more rehearsing. That wasn't the smoothest thing ever. But I've been following your work for a good 4 or 5 years now. I respect the work of CanucksArmy.com, truly. But I really like your work, Stefan, because I said this to you before. You're a smart guy, I can tell. Yet you don't write in a way that makes people not as smart not feel as smart. So thank you for doing that in particular. Do you have a particular angle or a style that you like to emulate or take on Canucks Army? Or is it positive? Is it negative? Is it stats driven? Is it more eye test? Like generally, what's your bread and butter over there?
I don't know that I have one. You write for long enough and people will talk about, what your angle is or your agenda is. But, a lot of the times I kind of just wake up in the morning and have a idle thought in my head and look around for a bit and see what's interesting and see what pops out. And then it's always fascinating afterwards. Sometimes I'll have an idle thought and look up a stat and, it goes a certain way. And I think, oh, that's interesting. That's worth writing about. Kind of just a passing thought. And then you'll get a comment that's like, clearly the spin you've put on this is all a part of your anti whatever or pro whatever agenda. And it's like, well, I guess it's a thing I thought of at 6:30 in the morning.
Well, that's pretty funny. We'll get to one of those things in a few minutes, but let's break down this game before we actually talk about the goals and stats and streaks broken, NHL debuts. What'd you think of this game overall for game number 76 of the season for the Vancouver Canucks?
It's hard to come away from any of these games with too concrete of a thought.
Yeah.
I think my reaction to almost every play, positive or negative, in the Canucks games these days is that that Larry David gif. It's kind of a cliche, but the one from Curb Your Enthusiasm where he's doing the back and forth reaction. It's that the Canucks score and you're like, yeah, oh well, that might hurt the tank and the Bedard odds and whatever, but I'd still rather see them score and win than not. So. Yeah, so it's functionally and practically speaking, it's okay that they lost.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to at least see the streak continue for Pettersson.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And we're two smart guys, two good looking guys, goes without saying. I think we're smart enough to know what every point given or not given means in the standings. We know what the big prize could be. But yes, we're fans. And you're right. When Besser scored that first goal, I admit, I gave myself a big fist pump, I should say, or pump fist, whatever you want to call it. I cheered. And then as LA looked to be the stronger team, you could tell one of those teams is going to the playoffs and one of the team just can't wait for the season to end. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing the motivational game, then LA is playing to secure their spot in, the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs. Very exciting. And the Canucks are, playing to not get eliminated until Tuesday. So those are just very different ball games. It's kind of harder to do a pump up speech in the change room for staving off elimination for another 2 days. So LA obviously came out a little bit harder and with a little bit more to play for, and that's to be expected. They are a pretty good hockey team.
They are indeed, and I love the use of the word staving, as obviously that's really good. So let's talk about the goals real quick. Besser, if you remember this one, it was actually a nice play. Hughes gains his own, but it goes to all three forwards. Di Giuseppe to Miller. Miller takes the shot. And then Besser's in the right place at the right time. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about Besser in a few minutes, but he's really picked up his scoring a little bit, hasn't he? And he's just overall had, I think, a quietly good season, better than most people would expect, without giving away everything for the second segment. Is that, what do you think of that goal? And is it kind of par for the course for what he's been up to the last 20 games or so?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when you talk about things to root for late in the season, I think everybody's still rooting for Brock Besser to some extent, right? So to see him score is always a positive, regardless of the game situation. He's had a really interesting year. Earlier today, I was looking at the just the game logs on NHL.com for his season because I kind of had it stuck in my head that he had, I guess, a slow start to the season, and then you look at he had points in I think his first 5 games, and he's been more or less consistent scoring wise throughout the season. I think it's with the old patented eye test where you see that he's had these real ups and downs throughout the season, but he's definitely ending on a high note, which is positive for a number of reasons I think we'll get into shortly.
Yes, awesome. So Canucks are up 1-0, but then just 7 minutes later, it's I will follow him. No, I'll follow. I can barely say this guy's name. You'll see. I butcher everyone's names except the Japanese guys, which we'll get to. Yeah. So I followed himself a good game in that first goal. It was 4-4 actually. The Canucks were just taken off of a power play. The LA Kings hadn't started theirs yet, and it was the vaunted. I'm not blaming them, but the Stadnicka and Oman line were out there, and I saw a bit of confusion between Niels Oman and Ethan Bear. In fact, after the goal went in, I followed with a nice shot. Ethan Bear took a quick look over his shoulder, and I think he was kind of wondering, how we're both of us over here and no one was taking this guy.
Yeah, it didn't look great for those two, which is probably not ideal because they're definitely playing for roster spots next year when it comes to Oman and Stadnicka. But I had an interesting thought at the time actually, is that there must be some camera person whose job it is to assign blame for a goal against and find, because I don't know if you noticed it goes straight to Niels Oman and it tracks him as he skates to the bench with his head down. And that seems to happen very often. So I think there must be someone who is like the scapegoat finder on each goal. Just get that camera on the person who feels bad right now.
That is a great point, Stefan. It's formulaic. The puck goes in. It'll usually be a shot to our bench, right? To see Tocchet looking at the iPad that's embedded in his bench. Then it'll go to the scapegoat. So we need the scapegoat finder, and then maybe Demko swigging some water, and then finally to the goal scorer.
Yeah, and then you'll get 2 or 3 shots of LA fans interspersed throughout the audience. They've got them ready. They've got a camera person on them right off the bat. Yeah.
I love it. Actually, and it's funny you mentioned that. Peek behind the curtain for everyone watching on Game Over right now. My son Sean was at a game where he was sitting in the row behind one of the cameramen for Sportsnet, and then the cameraman just kind of left one of his sheets kind of in his workstation or on. I don't know if Sean actually reached over and grabbed it, but it's really interesting. So on this cameraman sheet, I don't think I'm saying anything I can't. He had basically, pictures of every single player and every single coach. And then he had certain players that he was supposed to focus on. So whenever this line was on the ice, it's this guy. I guess if there's a producer there that's got all these spreadsheets, and he'll know exactly camera 4 is on Oman or camera 6 is on Dakota or whatever. So that's a really good point. I think it makes the scapegoat finding a little bit easier.
It's interesting then, because that means, like, I don't think we're going to go as far as to suggest that the NHL is rigged or pre-plans its plot lines. I know the NFL had a little bit of a thing with that this year, but they must sit down in a pre-production meeting and talk about tonight's storylines and narratives like they would before any reality show, and put it up on the board and go, we're going to do the Connor Garland subplot tonight and really focus on that. So get a camera on him at all times and see what he does.
That's a great point. Well, they should have had a follow camera, because he scores a second. This one was a bit messy. This was on the power play. The Kings don't waste any time. And Arvidsson puts that really hard shot basically through Demko. And then there was a bit of a scramble. It was Pettersson. It was Bear. I think, not two of the strongest guys. So it's not like they could muscle anyone out. But I don't even know how much of a stick Follow got on that puck. Did you see that, Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't look like much. It was kind of a wild scramble, and I don't think it was Demko's fault by any stretch of the imagination. When you've got 3 defenders in front of you and the puck still ends up on the other team's stick, that's never on the goal. I think tonight Demko was probably, I don't know if I want to say hung out to dry. That's probably a bit extreme, but his team probably did him fewer favors than usual, I would say.
Yeah, and you're looking at the defense core, and we'll get to that in a second as one of the big stories with all the defensemen that are injured. But yeah, they're really, you could argue those are 3 of 6 only were regulars, and then but we'll get to that. So then it's 2-1 going into the third, and then it's Kaliev who scores, and this one was kind of unfortunate. I think it looked innocent enough. It was a 2-on-2, and it was Jack Rathbone, and who was his defense partner in that one? Was it Burrows? Maybe.
I don't know.
But I do. I do remember the initial shot.
I took note of that.
Yeah, it goes off of Rathbone. He actually makes a good block, but then the puck just bounces back in the middle. Now all 4 guys are basically tied up, and Kaliev, good job in following his own shot and puts it past Demko. Again, not Demko's fault, but another, much like the second goal, another kind of in front of the net, greasy goal by the Kings.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that goes back to the Kings just plain wanting it more, like we were talking about at the outset there.
Yeah. And then a fourth goal, we don't have to say too much. It was an empty netter by Lazar. Every time they said Lazard's name, I kept thinking Lazar, but I said, no, Lazar's hurt and he doesn't play for the Kings. So a 4-1 victory. It wasn't the most inspiring hockey, but Pettersson, I guess a couple of the main storyline. One of them was Pettersson trying to break or tie the record of 15 straight games of point with Peter Nedved, one of my favorite players, and Todd Bertuzzi. And he just... It wasn't just him. It just seemed like you're kind of right. The Canucks didn't have a lot in the tank. We talked about defensive zone maybe hanging Demko out to dry, but even the offensive zone, I think Besser actually was quite dangerous. He had a lot of he shoots the puck so hard that you can always hear it like smash against the boards behind the goalie. But overall, I didn't know if any of the Canucks players, including Petey, had a lot of good chances. Well, Kuzmenko had that one, but not a lot of offense for the team. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, they just seem to be I guess frustrated a lot in their attempts. You especially felt it at the end as I'm sure Pettersson started to feel that point streak start to slip away. Like, sometimes point streaks, you think like, who really matters? It's kind of this innocuous thing, points in a row, who really cares? But I think it matters to the players. And I think Pettersson was clearly aware on some level that he was, potentially chasing a franchise record. And you could see the squeezing of the stick a little bit more as the game progressed, and especially with the goalie pulled at the end. It was one of those things where like they pulled the goalie, but they were clearly trying for Pettersson there. I think there was a moment, I hope I'm not misremembering this, but where Hughes with the goalie pulled, had the puck in the slot and very clearly could have taken a shot, but I don't know, maybe I'm imagining this. They almost like calculated, okay, no, it's been 2 touches since Pettersson. We got to get it back to him before we make any shot attempts because we're really going for the streak. And if, Miller and Besser touched it in between, it's no good. We got to reset and get it back to Pettersson. That's how it felt to me anyway. So.
No, it's funny you mentioned that, Stefan. I felt the same way. I didn't count it with as much detail, but you could certainly, as 2.5 minutes left, PD basically didn't change until the empty netter. He just kind of stayed there, and that's a really, really good point. It would be nice. It'll be another nice story in in a season where there weren't a lot of good stories, quite frankly. Now,
yeah, but
yes.
it's just numbers. It's just stats at the end of the day. It's not something we're going to remember too much one way or another.
So tell me, what'd you think of the debut of Akito Hirose?
It's kind of a cliche with the, especially with a young, defensively minded player to say you didn't notice him at all. And that to be like the ultimate compliment. You always want to say like these, but I did actually notice him, a couple times. Hirose, is that
so
that's the correct pronunciation? I saw you had a tweet on this.
It's so funny because I'm totally not that guy usually. But there's 2 things I got hung up on, Stefan, and many of the viewers will know this. One of them is the difference between interpreter versus translator. I'm not going to test you. Interpreter, I learned, is verbal and speaking, whereas translator is written. So anytime Kravtsov or Podkolzin are speaking for Kuzmenko, they are interpreting for him, not translating. So that's just a small thing I've noticed. Every media member except Baron Basher gets that wrong. But the one tonight is, there's no C. There's no, although his name's spelled S-E, his last name is the last 2 letters, there's no C sound in Japanese. So it's either a she, which is S-I, but it's S-H-I, like sushi, or in this case, it's se. So it's Hirose is the, so that's the Japanese language lesson for today. But actually, I'll give you my 2 cents. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents, and then I'd love to know what you thought. I thought there's only one play at the start of the third where it was poor. You might remember he got stripped at the line, and then they went in for a chance. But there are more than a couple times where he made a really nice deft backhand pass behind his own net to Myers on the other side, or he looked like he was going to try and skate it out of trouble, and then just a quick pivot and then going out the other side. It just, I really noticed. I wasn't trying to look for him to be good just because I wanted him to be good. I actually thought he showed a lot of composure for his first game.
Yeah, I think composure is probably the word. Like there were a couple of times I noticed him have the puck in the corner and be under fairly heavy pressure. I mean, the LA Kings are quite a. Oh, am I glitching on your end there? I look like I'm glitching on my end.
Oh, yeah, you're fine now. Yeah, you're good.
Okay,
that looked like a good dance move though.
Thank you. I was like, whoa, I do not feel like I'm twitching that much here. No, there were a couple of times where he was like, the LA Kings are a really good forechecking team. They're young, they're fast, they're huge. They've got some really big bodies there. And there were a couple of times where, he's not the largest person in the world, Hirose.
Yeah.
But he was under a lot of pressure and he still maintained composure, and he kept hold of the puck and made a couple of spins away from a very large and very fast forechecking LA King. And that's pretty impressive in your first NHL game to go from, being in the NCAA a couple of weeks ago, which is, fine competition, but it's certainly not the NHL, to the LA Kings coming at you hard in the corner and you're still keeping your head about you. That's fairly impressive, I would say.
I would agree with you, Stefan. And I guess I was wrong about it being Kyle Burroughs with Jack Rappel in the third Kings goal, because Burroughs is the only defenseman who actually ended up with a +1. So it was actually Bear was a -2. So maybe it was him. And then Hirose, as we talked about, was 0. It was even with 1 hit, 2 blocks. He also had 1 shot attempt, but it did go wide. So here's the last thing I'll say about this game. Would love your thoughts on it, and then we can move on to some of your work. Is the defense, when you heard the stat, there's 15 different defensemen that have been used this year, which is pretty crazy. And that includes guys that have been traded like Shannon Stillman. So three guys with Hronek out, and there's 3 guys basically that you say are bona fide NHLers in Hughes, Bear, and Myers. And then you have Hirose making his debut, Kyle Burroughs, a journeyman, but a solid one. And then of course, the missing one. Oh yeah, Jack Rathbone, who we still want to give a chance. But yeah, that left side, I kind of tweeted about it, kind of sarcastically, but still, I know it's it's not a lot of experience, but in Hughes, Hirose, and Rathbone, you got actually 3 decent skaters on the left. I'm not saying that they're the best defensemen ever, but at least you can get the puck out of your own end now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's definitely way too early to say on Hirose. That'll take time. The odds are stacked against any NCAA signing, even though he looks like a pretty, pretty skilled one. I'm still pretty bullish on Jack Rathbone personally. I think Canucks fans got a little, I should be careful with my words here, overprivileged when it came to prospects hitting the scene very well and smoothly transitioning into the NHL. I mean, of course, you've got Besser, Pettersson, Hughes 3 years in a row. But even players like Höglander came in and transitioned very cleanly into full-time NHL time as a rookie. And so when a player comes in and struggles at first, it might seem surprising. And, you had a lot of people write Rathbone off as a bust after just a couple false starts at the NHL. But most players take a couple false starts at the NHL, never mind a skilled, somewhat undersized defender. I think he's looked great since coming up. He had a good season down in Abbotsford. He was one of the top scoring under 24 players in the AHL, not just defenders, like players, period. Right. So among those genuine prospects, he was still highly rated in terms of scoring. And I think he's looked certainly the best he ever has at the NHL level since coming up this time. And I'm still pretty optimistic in him working out in the long term.
I'm with you. Would you... Okay, I'll ask you this last question for the segment. Would you be okay with a left side of Hughes, OEL, Rathbone next season?
I mean, no. I mean, sure, I would be, because next season is not the be all and end all when it comes to, making the playoffs or anything like that. Yeah. So ultimately I would be. I don't think Rathbone is probably ready for the top 4 yet, if ever. Like he does, well, I don't know if I'd say ever, but definitely maybe not yet. And I don't think OEL is made for the top 4 anymore. And Tocchet can talk about the glimmer in his eye all he wants, but I don't predict that comeback story is going to come to fruition, personally speaking.
Yeah.
So I still would, I'm very big on, I think the team, the 2 missing pieces are another top 4 right-hander and another top 4 left-hander. And I think you ultimately will end up splitting Hughes and Hronek and giving them each another partner. But,
I agree.
Yeah. But if it's next year, then who cares? I could live with it. if OEL is still around next year.
Right.
Hint.
Well said. Well, let's leave everyone on that cliffhanger. So we'll bring an end to the segment. We'll take a 2-second pause so I can insert an ad later for the podcast, and then we'll get into the second segment. Okay, Stefan. So before we press record or press go live, you're telling me about your next article that you're pretty excited about. Instead of a spoiler, we'll call this a bit of a preview. What are you working on that you're allowed to say right now? Yeah.
So I'm writing a little bit. Well, when I say write, I have like 2 sentences written down in a notepad right now. So don't think I'm doing too much extra homework here. But I definitely had it jotted down that I wanted to write something about Brock Besser at some point this week. Kind of hit me on the sentimental front that it might be his final week as a Canuck, and he's had a pretty good run. And so I wanted to take a run at summing that all up and kind of maybe putting a cap on his Canuck story, if that is what ends up being the case.
Yeah. And before we get into maybe the angle you may take or the angles, if you're a betting man, would you bet on him not being with the team next season?
Yeah. I think that I mean, if you look at just the sheer number of wingers that are going to need space next year, you've got to have Podkolzin up with the team and ideally in the top 6. I think you've got to have Höglander up with the team. He's waiver eligible soon enough, so you kind of need to. Then you've got Kravtsov still in the mix. You've got all these different players. Makheyev's coming back. There's just no room. And then you've got this kind of trio of Besser, Garland, Beauvillier. I think one of them is gone for sure. And I think probably 2 if they can swing it. I think Beauvillier may end up being the last person standing out of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I presume the reason why you kind of lump them together is just the money. There, one Beauvillier is making 4.2, Garland's just making under 5, Boeser making 6.6. That's a lot of money. And I don't call them. I won't say they're redundant players. That kind of sounds almost disrespectful. But you're right. You name all the young guys of Kravtsov, Podkolzin, Hoglander, then Kuzmenko, Mikheyev already. There's 5, and then these 3. That's already 8 guys that you could argue are battling for 6 spots. So yeah, you do the math. That's maybe 2 that need to go, and then you can have them on Joshua or anyone on your fourth line. But yeah, that's a really, really good point. And you think that 6.65 over the next 2 more seasons is going to be tough? Do you have to sweeten that, or do you just got to temper your expectations for what comes back?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I spoke about maybe even hanging on to Boeser just on the old, sell high, buy low kind of principle, and that he was definitely selling low at that point. He has, again, we talked about how consistent he was throughout the year, so I don't have rebound as the answer, but he's certainly playing better under Tocchet. Maybe he's rebuilt enough trade value, but the cap is tight all the way around, and they didn't work their way out of escrow this year, so it's going to be tight for at least another year. I think their best bet may be to weaponize retention a little bit and try to make him a more compelling contract, and then at least get a bit more capital back for him. But that remains to be seen. I think retention is probably going to be used first on Myers if he gets moved, and then on Boeser would be the top 2 targets for that.
Do you have a limit as to how many you can retain?
3.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Canucks currently have 1, and then that's Horvat, who will be done as of this year.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for that. It's interesting. Boeser's season, Stefan, is one might look at the goal total, 17 now, and say, well, that's not that good. But his point per game of 0.78 is exactly, it's right on his career average. So he's being just as productive as his career, and you could argue a more complete player now. But I think a lot of people, unless they get into numbers or simply just observe and look past the goal total, they might not see that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he came into the league as a goal scorer and a sniper type. And so anytime you look and he's under 20 goals, he might still crack 20 goals on the season. That's still entirely possible at the rate he's currently scoring.
Yeah.
But you mentioned his points per game is at his career average. His assists per game is higher than it's ever been throughout the season. So as a playmaker, he's never been better. And that's more of a complete game. I think sometimes we get a little too tied to certain narratives with players. Oftentimes, I could go way too deeply into this.
Go for it.
We've got I'm going deep. We've got such a fascination with the draft, right? I think maybe this is a Canadian culture thing. We love the draft. We love watching the little TSN and Sportsnet profiles and Bob McKenzie coming in going, this guy's the next. It was making the rounds today where they were saying, Elias Pettersson, he could top out as a Paul Stastny type.
Yes.
Whoa, imagine that. And so you hear these narratives about a player in a quick little blurb on TSN when they're drafted, as 18-year-olds. And then that narrative kind of sticks a lot of the time, right? And this is how we ended up with Bo Horvat being seen as this two-way Patrice Bergeron-esque player, when that wasn't really a reputation that he'd earned until much, much later in his NHL career, if at all. And so I think Boeser has had this reputation of being a one-dimensional, people use the word soft, sniper type. And I don't know that that's ever been the case. And I certainly don't think that it has been as he's progressed as a player. I know a season or 2 ago, he was somewhere in the top 10 for board battle win percentages in the NHL. I don't know if you saw this. I think it was 2 seasons ago when he led the team in scoring. So he was one of the best puck battlers, along the boards. And if you had told that to someone just on the street, hey, Brock Boeser's one of the best board guys in the NHL, they would have thought you were losing your mind, right? So I don't know, sometimes these narratives, I've said it before that I think people hate him because he's pretty. And that's not entirely unserious when I say that, he's a handsome guy with long flowing blonde hair. And maybe it's easy to paint him into a narrative of being, one dimensional or concerned more with offense than defense when the way he plays doesn't really match that perspective.
Wow. No, as you go deep and talk about this more, Stefan, I'm really looking forward to this piece. Obviously, you talked about the sentimental part, so we know the story about not only getting into this team, but really the sad passing and the health problems of his father, Duke. Do you think overall a change in scenery? Well, I think the answer is probably yes. But would a change of scenery be good for him, can he actually still be productive, good here? But maybe that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about sure he can, but maybe the contract is still one that you need to move. So kind of a all over the place question is maybe a comment on, would a change of scenery be good for him and help him get over those, they're not demons, but just simply everything that he's had to go through? Or is that going to happen? That could happen here as well. I don't know. I want it to happen here, but I don't know if it will.
I mean, it's hard to say on the emotional side, right?
Yeah.
Like these things are so, everyone experiences these sorts of emotions differently. Like it's, not to put too fine a point on it, but it did somewhat bother me that there was this much of a narrative from fans in the media this year that like, because Duke Besser's illness, had reached its unfortunate conclusion that, Besser was kind of past this, awful segment of his life and could move on and focus on hockey, as if the loss of a father is not this horrible tragedy that's surely going to continue to affect him a long time thereafter, right? And everyone grieves differently. And so I think there was this expectation that he would be playing as if he had this weight lifted from his shoulder. And I don't think I had that same expectation. Like, it's just, it's a hard thing to try to put yourself inside someone else's shoes on.
Yeah.
And so I think, another setting could help him get away from maybe some of those feelings, sure. But then on the other hand, he's probably got a pretty good support network in Vancouver, right? And we know that he's really close with a lot of the players. And so it's hard to say. It could maybe get him away from the expectations that have defined him so far in his career. Might be the best way that it's a fresh start for him.
That's an excellent point. That's a really good, I'm really glad you mentioned that, Stefan, because I likely was one of those people who maybe made a almost a flippant presumption that because Duke actually passed, that maybe it would be better for Besser from a production standpoint. But that might be a little bit too almost not putting enough significance into that loss and the emotional and mental struggle that someone would go through losing a family member. That's, I'm really glad you brought that up. So, and he's even come out and said that it's been a very tough year for him emotionally, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has, and it's it's not just that. Of course, it's all these injuries that he's had to overcome, and the false start where he had he had the hand injury, and then he played a few games, and it literally burst back open, which is like a very good metaphor of Brock Besser's career. At one point, this is a little inside baseball for you. I think after either the first or second injury, I got a message from David Quadrelli saying, can you write this article? And then sometimes he'll just give me a title and ask me to spin on it. And it was A Brief History of Brock Besser Not Being Able to Ever Catch a Frickin' Break, I think was the proposed title. And it's true, right? Like, I think in all his time in Vancouver, he's started the season healthy once out of 6 runs at it or something like that. It's something along those lines, right? Where it's just barrier after barrier after barrier. So again, where people would call him, soft or something like that, he's overcome a great amount of difficulty, far more than the average player, I'd say. And he kind of kept smiling throughout it all.
Have you always been a fan of Besser, Stefan, or is it something that happened recently, or you've always liked him?
No, I've definitely always liked him. I think if you followed the team through the kind of darker post 2011 days, Horvat arrived first, but Besser was the first to kind of, really spark that hope that there might be brighter days ahead, where he came in after his college career and scored however many goals in his brief little audition, and then started taking off as a rookie. It was, I think he kickstarted the new era in a very positive way. So I'll definitely always have some positive feelings for him on that regard.
That's a great point. I remember even making comparisons of, could Horvat and Besser be the next Sedin's. Like I remember even I didn't write a good thing I did a whole vlog about it, but yeah, I remember having those kind of sentiments, and that's a really good point too about the draft, because the prior year, 2014, was Jake Virtanen, so we did Horvat in 13, Jake Virtanen in 14, and even back then, people weren't sure if that was the best pick. We know what's happened since, and then yes, back on track 2015 with Besser, then off the track again 2016 with Juolevi, and then you go PD Hughes, Podkolzin, not bad. Yeah, after that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. All right, so we got that. So I know you just got 2 lines on a notepad right now. I don't know, like for good writers like you, how quickly it is. Does that mean, 2 lines now? Ha ha ha! It'll be up on Tuesday, or is this a 2-week thing, or I don't know how often they make you write.
Tuesday might be a bit much. I think Wednesday is when this one is expected. Actually,
so actually wasn't that far off?
I think. Yeah, I think I pre-planned the headline to start with entering what could be his final week as a Canuck. So I think I do have to wait until it is technically his final week or potential final week, which I think is Wednesday. So
right.
Yeah,
because the Canucks
don't want to jump the headline.
Yeah, and potentially his last week and a half, it just doesn't look as good, I guess, on a headline.
No, too wordy. Hey, on that note, sorry, total sidebar here, but on the sentimental side of things, occurred to me today that it may have been Alex Edler's last game in Vancouver today. He's a soon-to-be 37-year-old pending UFA. Unfortunately, left the game with an injury, which, again, is very, almost symbolic of Edler's time with the Canucks.
Yeah.
He day late and a dollar short, despite his best efforts many times. And so it's unfortunate if that is the last time he gets to skate on Rogers Arena ice, but not, kind of in keeping with his long-term Canucks narrative, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know if you were watching at the very start, because he was in the starting lineup, so they did a close-up on him, and he's got the white, hair and his goatee now, and and then he goes and flattens Quinn Hughes behind the net.
Yeah, it's very strange to see him look so old, because you see every NHL player get old, but he's gotten grizzled. Like you see the years and the games on Alex Edler's face. He's got that kind of like broken smile and stuff now. And when I really started following hockey very closely, it was actually right when the first lockout occurred. That was when I was kind of getting old enough to really truly follow it. And that was when Edler and Kessler and Burroughs and all those guys were coming through on the Manitoba Moose.
Yes.
And so, some part of me still sees, young Alex Edler in my head as one of those first really formative Canucks memories. And then, now he's, he doesn't look that way anymore.
Yet another guy who came up during that time, Kevin Bieksa, he looks like he hasn't aged a day when you see him on the panel.
Oh yeah, Bieksa looks younger than his playing days somehow. I don't know what his secret is, but he actually looks significantly younger, I think.
That's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to invite the viewers now to put your questions in the chat. We'll get to 2 or 3 before Stefan goes, but as I give people a couple minutes to do that, the reason why I wanted Stefan on 2 weeks ago so badly was he wrote a really good article on Canucks Army right after John Garrett announced his retirement. And it's always timely because we're now into the last, half a dozen games of seeing him on at least the regional channels. Really quickly, Stefan, can you give a quick just summary of what that article was and kind of the feedback that you got from it?
Yeah, it was, I was definitely in my feelings, it was a surprise announcement, which always gets you. And right when you're starting to run out of reasons to care about the end of the Canucks season, there's a pretty powerful one, right? And then, to hear Shorthouse get a little choked up there, I was definitely, writing from the heart. And, I thought a lot about, just John Garrett's overall legacy as a very positive influence, right? I mean, there's a lot of talk these days about the, less than savory personalities in the hockey world sometimes, right? And that's well earned, but John Garrett is by the very definition, a good old boy. He's been in the league and around the league for half a century now, one way or another, and he's this, anecdotal story wizard, and sometimes guy who's been around the NHL for 50 years and loves to tell funny stories is not a great combination, in terms of, non-problematic content. And yet here's John Garrett, he's never had to apologize. He's never been anything less than like, inclusive in his messaging. Like he never even toes that line of offensiveness. So, in the same league that we've got our, Jack Edwards and those types that, scream into a microphone for a living, to just have this, and it's Garrett and Shorthouse too, to have these two, just nice men that are genuine friends and model like positive male friendship on the air every night and are genuinely sweet with one another. It's just, it's just this really nice thing. I think I said in there, the only time I can remember John Garrett ever having to apologize for something he said on the air was when he jinxed the one Luongo shutout that one time. And it was one of those where, if that's the worst thing you've done on the air, then that's a pretty good run. Yeah. I said I had suggested that he'd be put in the Ring of Honor, and most of the feedback I got was, no, probably not that, but probably something else. Jim Robson got a gondola. So, obviously a lot of people said a concession stand for John Garrett, and he would probably love that. But surely there's something that they can name after John Garrett, I hope.
Oh, that's awesome. And I trust that the feedback was constructive as opposed to, you just never, I don't know what it's like for you as a content creator. I know I'm very open to constructive feedback and disagreements as long as it's rooted in an actual disagreement with what I say, as opposed to, someone making fun of my looks or saying a homophobic comment or like racist comment. So, yeah. So was the feedback generally pretty good? Those the ones that were disagreeing?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to find many out there that don't like John Garrett. Right. I don't think, at least I haven't encountered it. So I don't think there were many. There was one who, it's funny you bring this up. There's one comment that really stuck out where he said, I say he because it's almost certainly a man. Yeah. Said something like, "Oh, here you another media guy trying to make yourselves the center of the story again. You're not on the ice media. You don't go in the Ring of Honor." And I replied in a way where I'm like, I'd like to be upset at your bitterness, but I realize you've just lumped me in with John Garrett. You're referring to you media types as me and also John Garrett, and that's such an honor. So I'm like, you've accidentally like made me feel really proud about myself. So love it. Good try, anonymous commenter. You failed.
Anonymous commenter with no profile picture. Yes.
Exactly right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm happy to be lumped into any club with John Garrett at any time.
That is awesome. And we have one question. It's kind of cute, actually, from a very loyal, a good friend of mine, a loyal viewer of this, Shannon. So you mentioned that you became a Canucks fan during one of the lockouts. So she was trying to guess your age. I don't know if you'll play this game. If I give you what she guessed, will you? Of
course.
Will you go high or low? Will you affirm it? Yeah, like you actually.
Oh yeah, for sure.
She guesses 32.
Ooh, excellent guess, Shannon. You are very, very close. I am just slightly older than that.
Okay, very good. But certainly not as old as me. I'm 48, but that's why they call me the Papa of YouTube, which is fine.
There you go. Yeah, that's not a bad title to have. I'm in my Henrik Sedin year, nice. I like to say. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good guess, Shannon.
For a little bit longer.
Very good. That's awesome. Well, Stefan, this has been great. Thank you for sharing your insights on the game, giving us a sneak peek into your next article for a Canucks Army. And once again, if you want to follow Stefan and his work, his full name is his Twitter handle is Stephan Roget on Twitter, and then writing, like I said, regularly for Canucks Army. And do you have any big plans for the off season? I know Canucks coverage is probably going to end the third week of April. So what happens after that for you?
That's kind of for some people, that's the off season. That's my bread and butter. Like I've always really enjoyed talking about the roster management and free agency and that sort of stuff. So I'm honestly kind of just spinning my wheels until then. And then I'm really excited to I think I'm going to take a good hard look at the defense market first. And cause that's the big thing this off season. And then we'll go from there. That's where I actually almost prefer to work, is in the off season without all those, distracting games and everything.
Exactly. Yeah. Who wants to talk about those? Well, thanks again, man. Yeah. I look forward to consuming your content throughout the off season. I know a bunch of the viewers here will, now that they've met you. And man, I would love to get you on my own channel then if I know that you really get into the free agency, the trades, the draft, all that kind of thing. I would love to continue to connect with you in terms of content, if that's cool.
Of course, Clay, like I talked about positive vibes from, Brock Besser and John Garrett and all those folks. And I definitely include you in the mix too. I've always appreciated your ceaseless positivity in, what's been a pretty dark era of Canucks hockey, if we're being totally honest here. Yeah. So, you always put out the very good vibes, and I appreciate that. So I was very happy to get the invite to you tonight.
Thank you. It'll be all worth it once they're raising that cup, whether it's in my lifetime or yours. We will remember this day. We'll remember this day. Well, thanks, brother, for joining me. What I'll do is I'll let you sign off, and then I will wrap up the show with a couple closing remarks. So once again, Stephan Roget, follow him on Twitter, read his stuff at Canucks Army, and thanks once again for joining me tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me. Anytime, pal. Thank you.
All right, talk soon. Thanks, bud. Bye.
Bye.
There we go. That was Stefan. He is awesome. Make sure you follow his stuff, his work at Canucks Army. And like I said off the top, he's a bright guy. He's a very good communicator, and not yet he writes in a way though that's easy to understand, easy to digest, and simply makes a lot of sense. So once again, I appreciate all of you for joining me. On your way out, make sure that you like this video. There's only 4 likes in here, but we got up to 30 people in here, so that ratio is not the best. So like the video on your way out. That will be awesome. Also, make sure you subscribe to SDPN on this very channel, and you can also subscribe to me. I'm Canuck Clay, both on Twitter and right here on YouTube. If you like Canucks content and you want more of it, although many of you in here are regular viewers of me already as well, I thank you. I will be doing my own show 2 hours from now, starting at 10:30 Pacific on my own YouTube channel. Continue to break down this game and continuing to build community out here out west. So it might be late for some of you watching in the East. I'm just looking up the next show. The next game is the Seattle Kraken. It is Tuesday night, April the 4th. And it looks like that it'll be Samantha Chang hosting Game Over Vancouver on Tuesday night. So make sure you join her and the community at the conclusion of the Canucks Kraken game on Tuesday. So once again, thanks for being here. Always appreciate you. We never take you for granted. And the Canucks lose 4-1 to the LA Kings. Akito Hirose debuts, and Elias Pettersson's point streak is snapped at 14 games. Thanks for joining. Tuesday night, Seattle Kraken, Canucks, Sam doing Game Over. So as always, stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourselves, and take care of each other. And earlier today, I had a couple people actually call me self-centered, but that's enough about them. Take care, and go Canucks go. Good night, everyone.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.